Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
They nearly got me arrested. That's the type of noise we have to put up with.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines.
Have you got your recorder on?
Yeah, I have.
Good.
Really?
Your home life can turn into a living hell.
Don't be my dog!
What a minute of you. What the hell's about with you?
Coming up, having a policeman for a neighbour
It's like being in Big Brother.
turns into a nightmare.
What, me? I say shut up, what, I'm under arrest?
Knives come out over the garden fence.
I felt a cut to my face.
Stay away from our piece of land.
And an assault by hosepipe.
The warden just hit me straight in the face.
A few miles off the coast of Devon is an idyllic, picturesque town. But a beautiful town doesn't always come with perfect neighbours.
This is Latin for don't let the bastards get you down. That describes my situation to a T.
Jackie has lived in the area her whole life. And 8 years ago, she moved into a new home with her partner and 2 daughters.
This is a cul-de-sac where I live that we're just turning into. And then my house is just in the corner behind that fence down the walkway. And that's where I used to park. Oh, so tempting to keep going and demolish them.
Jackie's home was a hideaway, set back below the cul-de-sac on steep land, and only reached via a long walkway.
The minute I saw the house, I fell in love with it. I just thought, I love this house. And I was so happy when I got it. And, you know, for ages, I just look out the window thinking, oh my God, how the hell did I get up here? It's like one of the nicest houses that I've ever lived in, because we've lived in a few. But this is the first ever one that we've actually owned. And it was just really nice.
It wasn't just Jackie and her daughters who would benefit from the move to the family's dream home.
Like 15 years ago, I started fostering, and at the moment I'm focusing on just supported living for 16 to 18-year-olds, mainly lads. Even growing up, it was always a busy house, and whenever I had friends over, we'd always say, welcome to the madhouse. I didn't mind at all. I quite liked it. It was having extra brothers and sisters. I enjoy my job, and I consider that I always go the extra mile for these children.
The teens who moved in had often come from troubled backgrounds, and Jackie hoped this house could be a more peaceful home.
I get into my car one morning and there's a note on my car telling me that I can't park here. So I thought, whoa, what on earth is all that about? Because I had paperwork saying that I own these 2 parking spaces.
The note was signed with the house number where Jackie's new neighbours, Janice, and her Detective Chief Inspector husband, Nicholas, lived. Still under the impression she was entitled to the spaces, Jackie continued to park in them.
This is from the estate agent, and it says that there are 2 allocated parking spaces at the top of the deck walkway.
Jackie claims she found more notes on her car. But things only started to make sense to Jackie after an awkward encounter with Janice.
You know, her manner was really quite offish. I thought, crikey, you know, I've only just moved here. And she was really quite, well, frosty with me, shall we say. And we had a bit of a disagreement about it. I bought the house in good faith with 2 parking spaces.
But neighbour Janice had some bad news for Jackie.
She eventually came down with paperwork from the land registry saying that it was hers. Afterwards I just thought, well, I can't argue with what's on their land registry, so I just never parked there again.
Accepting that the spaces belonged to her neighbour, Jackie now had a problem.
There was 4 of us here with cars, so I parked 2 at the top of the walkway, and then the other 2 were parked on the slope, on the entrance coming in. They've got to realise Jackie has to park somewhere.
Jackie's was the only house in the cul-de-sac with no allocated parking space. And even though parking wasn't allowed anywhere else in the close, for the next few years, Jackie and her family felt they had no other option.
We used to be able to park all the way down here where these plant pots are, and they decided to put the plant pots there because somebody decided that a fire engine might not be able to get down. I think the pots have been there just to make my life difficult.
But late one night, it became clear to Jackie that it might not just be about parking.
And I was walking home with my boyfriend at the time. We'd been to the social club with my foster child. On the way home, the foster boy went on ahead of me. I was in bed and I heard banging at the door, like hammering at the door. And I was petrified. I didn't want to move because I was like, who was that at the door? And I could hear all this commotion going on down by my front door.
Jackie's 17-year-old foster son, who we can't name for legal reasons, and neighbour Nicholas were in the middle of a heated exchange.
And then I heard the foster child and I flew out of bed, ran down the stairs. And I ran out the door and I was in my pyjamas and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then I started crying because it was just horrendous. I came round this corner and I said, what's he done? And he said, he's under arrest. I said, what for? He said, he's under arrest, he's woke my children up. So I've had enough of this. I've had 5 years of this shit.
The longer the scuffle went on, the more concerned Jackie and her daughters became.
These railings weren't here, so there was like about a 15 foot drop down there. So I grabbed him by the arm and I said, get that boy off the walkway. He's not safe and you're not safe.
But one thing was for sure, this was the beginning of a night from hell. Coming up, weed killer takes neighbours to boiling point.
I felt a punch to the right side of my face.
And next door's behaviour brings a man to his knees.
I mean, I've been in tears. He's just a nasty piece of work.
In Devon, Jackie had been fostering troubled teens. But one night, her latest charge had got into a fight with her neighbour, off-duty policeman Nicholas.
He was dragging the foster child there. And he was going, I've had enough of this. I've had 5 years of this shit. And then the foster child was like, what are you talking about, mate? I've only been here 3 months.
Neighbour Janice claimed the teen had woken and upset her children by shouting threats. She wasn't the only upset neighbour.
It's just bedlam here, and all this was in a state of repair. And it was just nightmare. You know, quite a few neighbours out. And they all started shouting abuse at us. It was just horrendous, and I'm crying. Then I ring the police to say come and help and that.
The police arrived on the scene, but what they did next was not what Jackie expected.
And they arrest my young lad. And then this other policeman comes in and starts telling me I'm under arrest. And I was in shock. I thought, what, me? He said, yes. I said, what, me? I was so shocked. I thought, well, I'm under arrest. He said, yes. And I got arrested as well.
Jackie and her foster son were arrested on suspicion of assault, occasioning actual bodily harm on a police officer. Jackie's foster son was also arrested for a Section 5 public order offence.
And I was put in a police cell, which is quite awful for somebody that's only ever had a parking ticket. Couldn't believe it when I knew my mum was locked up. Didn't know what was going to happen, because I've never known my mum to ever be locked up or be in trouble.
After spending the night in a police cell, Jackie was released without charge, but was still on police bail.
After 18 hours I was let out, and I was said to him, is my boy still here? And they said yes. I said, well, I'll wait for him. And they said, no, he's not going home with you.
The 17-year-old had made his home with Jackie for 3 months. But even though he too was released, he wasn't coming back with her.
when we found out that he couldn't stay here no longer because of the incident, and it was actually really sad to see him go. It definitely wasn't fair. I mean, this was his home and he liked it here. He got on with my girls, he got on with me, and he was a pleasure to look after. All because an off-duty policeman decided to act like the sheriff and put himself on duty.
But what had sparked off this devastating sequence of events?
What I discovered later was that my young man was coming in and he had his earphones on, and it was a rap song. So yes, there was a few swear words in a rap song, but he wasn't swearing at anyone. The policeman opens up his bedroom window and shouts out to him, "Shut the f*** up." So my boy goes, "You shut the f*** up." And then I think he said, "Do you know who I am?" And my boy goes, "I don't care if you're the King of England." And he just tootled in.
The details of how the fight started were disputed. Jackie herself was still on bail for assault, but she had no intention of accepting any guilt.
And I said, "If you think I'm going to take a caution or a warning, it's not happening. It gets dropped or it goes to court."
After being on bail for 4 months, Jackie was released without charge due to a lack of evidence.
When I found out that the charges of assault were dropped, I felt really pleased and glad about that.
Jackie, however, felt the arrest was unlawful and sued the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police, who later settled out of court. But relations in the street were still bad.
Me and my daughters used to come down onto the drive and think, oh God, you know, who's going to be about? Is there anything going to happen? Because it's really not a nice way to live, because we just wondered, what on earth have we done to them to not like us so much?
They wouldn't have to wait long to find out. Finding a forever home is always tough. But Chris Barnes is a property investor who buys houses and lets them out. So he decided to move into one of his favourite houses.
It's a nice house, semi-detached, close to York City Centre, which is what I wanted really. It's got a beautiful garden.
Chris already knew his next-door neighbours, 72-year-old Mr Gunn and his wife, having bumped into them on many previous visits.
If I saw Mr Gunn, I knew I'd be stuck for half an hour, because we'd both be having a real good chat, got on really well. And I thought, well, it's nice to know that I've got some good neighbours.
But after just 1 year, the friendly mood changed.
I'd walk down the driveway and see them and say hello, and they'd just ignore me. And I remember thinking, well, I don't understand why. What have I done?
Chris ignored his neighbours and got on with sorting out his new home.
I've always looked after the place, and you know, when I've got time to do it, and I always like looking after it. I've always cleaned the drive.
So when his drive kept getting messy, he noticed.
I was getting a lot of leaves on the driveway. I've got a eucalyptus tree in the back garden. It's quite a big tree, and I couldn't understand how they was getting to the driveway when the tree's so far back. You know, put them in the bin, and then 2 days later they'd be there again. And I was thinking, you know, I couldn't understand.
The leaves kept appearing, and Chris was determined to find the cause.
I was at my kitchen sink one day washing up, and I seen this hand come over the fence and dropping leaves onto my driveway. I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, it's the guy next door. When I realised, I caught him a few more times, his hand coming over, I thought, well, this is not on really. I just thought, well, maybe it's just going to be a one-off. But as time went on, it was not going to stop. It just carried on doing it. And so it became very annoying.
The strange behaviour next door continued for the next 2 years, but eventually Chris snapped and reported Mr Gunn to the police.
When the police went round to see him, they said that he was putting the leaves over because the leaves was falling into his garden off my tree. But I mean, it's a eucalyptus tree and doesn't really shed its leaves, and if it does, it's only, you know, a few.
Chris hoped that the chat with the police would warn his neighbour off. And for a few months, it seemed to have worked.
I was out here having a barbecue with some friends, having a nice time, a few beers, not making much noise really, and then one of the guys decided he was leaving. Opened the front door. The neighbour must have come across and he'd just dumped loads of leaves outside the front door. And I just thought, well, why would he do that? Maybe he's jealous that we're out there having a good time. I just didn't understand it.
When Chris phoned the police this time, the result was an harassment notice for Mr. Gunn.
I thought, thank God, at last, you know, something's actually, you know, because this had been happening for you know, a couple of years by this time. And I thought, well, thank God, you know, he's got to stop now.
The 12-month harassment order seemed to do the trick. And for a year, his driveway was clear of leaves.
As soon as it was up, it just started all over again. He was actually pushing leaves through the gaps in the fence individually, like a leaf, like that big, one by one, and I just couldn't believe it.
Chris felt that Mr. Gunn wasn't just back to his old tricks. Now he was taking things further.
Every time I went out in the car, I'd come back and the gate had been half closed, just pushed across, so that I'd have to get out of the car to open the gate, and it was just like torturous, like these constant niggling things. I was letting it get to me more than it should have done. You know, all my friends would say, oh, just ignore it. If you ignore it, you'll just, you know, go, and I said, I can't ignore it because it's there every day. You know, I'm seeing it every day.
But it wasn't just a mind game. Chris started to fear for his safety.
Started to find nails in my tyres. Maybe I'd only had one in my life of driving, and I got 5 in 1 year. Not like I'm driving on building sites or anything. So the only place for me where these nails was coming from was from next door.
His home was far from the sanctuary he had dreamt of. In Scotland, Christopher and Gail Slavin moved into their dream home in 1997. It was in the small town of Moodysburn near Glasgow.
I moved here because back garden was enclosed, so that was a big reason for moving up here.
It seemed like a perfect home, and the Slavins already knew their next-door neighbours, Maureen McGecky and her son Patrick.
Well, I actually grew up with Patrick, went to the same school as him.
We thought, yeah, we've got good neighbours.
At that time, the back gardens were only separated by a low fence.
We used to sit out the back and we'd have tea and a laugh and a wee gossip, and everything started really well.
But now, a 6-foot barricade divides the two gardens. The reason dates back to a family celebration 10 years ago.
It was a few weeks before my daughter's communion that I had noticed that Maureen was quite strange towards me. So I knocked on Mrs. McGecky's door to see what the problem was. I said, Maureen, have I done anything to offend you? And she says, indeed you have. I never got an invitation. Nobody in the family got any invitations. It was all just word by mouth. Just thought that's the way you'd done things.
Maureen did turn up to the ceremony, but she ignored Gail.
That was the way Maureen was. If she didn't like something that you did, she would let you know by not speaking to you.
Although the communion had caused ill feeling, the families managed to get their relationship back on track. And 2 years later, when Gail's son Paul was due for Holy Communion, she was eager not to make the same mistake again.
I'd actually got an invitation for Maureen, and only Maureen, nobody else got a written invitation. And I thought, well, that'll stop any misunderstanding.
The day of the communion arrived, and after the event, family and friends gathered at the Slavins' home. But there was no sign of Maureen. A few days later, it was obvious there was a problem.
So I was standing here putting the covers out, and Maureen came out the back, and I says, oh, hi Maureen, morning. And she just drew me a dirty look and about turned and went away in. I learned that it was because I never asked her into the communion personally. After I gave her an invitation, she was still wanting me to bring her into the house. It was downhill after that. We just never really spoke.
With tensions mounting, it didn't help when Maureen's son Patrick started enjoying a spot of nocturnal gardening.
Noticed Patrick out early hours in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, watering the garden, spraying weed killer. As long as he wasn't making noises and waking us up, there wasn't really a problem.
But when the Slavens started noticing their own plants dying, they grew concerned.
We used to have a wee bed of plants down here. They get ruined, and the hydrangea get half ruined, so we cut it all back, and that's when we put it. But the rest of them we flung out in the bin, and we stopped putting stuff in the garden, and that was that.
Convinced Patrick McGeecky's late-night weed killing was responsible for their dead flowers, the Slavens reported the incident to the police.
They said, you need witnesses and evidence, and we thought, oh no, he'll not do it again, that's it, he'll get fed up, I'll go away.
We spoke to Patrick McGeecky, and he refused to comment on any of the Slavens' allegations. But according to Christopher and Gail, a few nights after they reported the incident to the police, he was at it again. I
heard Gail getting up, went to the window, says, oh, Patrick's out with his weed killer. Grabbed my phone, said this would be a good time to hopefully get some evidence. Went down the stairs. I came to the back door, and Patrick was at the back fence spraying weed killer. I followed him up and down. He looked up, and that's when he noticed me. I was still videoing him.
I seen you. No, that's criminal damage, wee man. Doing deep shit.
And waves his hands, just doing a wee bit of weed killing at the back there.
Idiot! You stay away from our piece of land. Do you hear me?
Handed the phone to Gail, and as I done this, I felt a punch to the right side of my face.
Coming up, the fight spirals out of control.
I was in shock.
Things go from bad to worse in Devon.
You stupid bitch, you need to learn to drive.
And a battle that started over leaves gets violent.
Got me in the eyes. I couldn't believe it.
Life can be a strain, and we all have our burdens to bear. So we're giving you the chance to turn it around with our competition to win £10,000 tax-free. Let us lighten the load with 10 grand towards anything you like. How about 6 stress-free months knowing your bills are taken care of? Maybe a beach holiday with the family is just what the doctor ordered. Perhaps your car needs some attention and your home some TLC. Whatever your desires, we want to help you achieve them. So to be in with the chance of winning £10,000, text NIGHTMARE to 65515 or post your name and phone number to Nightmare, PO Box 7557, Derby DE10MP. Text costs £1.50 plus 1 message at standard network rate. Lines close at midday on the date shown on screen and 3 days later for postal entries. For rules and winners, go to channel5.com/win. In Devon, Jackie and her teenage foster son had been arrested for assault on their policeman neighbour.
You know, from the night of that incident, everything took a nosedive. You know, I just had a quiet life, and now there's all sorts going on.
But life in Jackie's household was going from bad to worse, and it seemed they were becoming increasingly unpopular in the area.
There was a knock at the door, and there was 2 policemen there, and I let them in. He got out his pieces of paper and saying that I was doing dangerous driving and scaring the children, which I was not. And they said that there was proof, and I said, how was there proof of me doing dangerous driving?
Jackie's other daughter, Lauren, was also facing accusations.
The police accused me of wheel spinning in the neighbourhood and driving my car at little children, which I wouldn't do that.
If my children were wheel spinning, surely they would have pictures of tyre marks on the road or something. Nothing.
Lauren and Robin were given warnings for antisocial behaviour. The family knew it wasn't policeman Nicholas making complaints to the police. They had no idea who it was. But it wasn't just the girls who felt they were being targeted.
Yeah, so that's the letter that came, and it was saying antisocial behaviour for me, and I thought, what?
With an arrest for assault and a warning for antisocial behaviour behind her, Jackie's livelihood as a supported lodgings host was now seriously under threat.
It's very important for me to have a clean CRB for the work that I do, and that it shows up that I have no criminal record and that I'm fine for working with these young vulnerable people that I work with.
And when she received her file from the Criminal Records Bureau, she couldn't believe what she saw.
To my horror, plastered all over my CRB is a level 2 antisocial behaviour, which is nonsense. It goes on about everything about antisocial behaviour being reported by neighbours concerning vehicles used in an antisocial manner, and reports of intimidation towards neighbours.
Neighbour Janice told us youths lodging at Jackie's would swear in the street and cause damage late at night. Jackie denies this, and after 6 months her record was wiped.
I'm now very thankful that my CRB is absolutely clean as a whistle, as it always has been in the past.
Jackie tried to get on with her life as normal, but trouble soon found her when she encountered another of her neighbours.
I was coming home one night, and when I got down here, I started to reverse into my space.
The free space, which was not owned by Jackie, was next to one of her neighbours' cars.
And it was a bit tight, and all of a sudden I could hear shouting at me. Whoa, whoa, stopped immediately. You stupid bitch, you need to learn to drive. And he was talking to me here. Said, you nearly hit my car, but I never hit it. You know, yes, I was close, but I never hit it.
Having already been accused of antisocial behaviour, Jackie got straight on the phone.
So I went down and created a log of antisocial behaviour to Devon and Cornwall Police immediately. The next morning, my phone goes really early, and I answer it, and it's a high-ranking policeman saying, oh, hello Jackie, how are you? Just to let you know that after you made that log last night, they rang in after you to say that you hurt his hip. I went, oh my God, they need to get a life. I said, I didn't hurt anybody's hip. We had plenty of room to run through the gap and to start verbally abusing me. Children's home. So now, because of that, it becomes a road traffic accident. I said, well, it's not a road, there's no traffic. I said, there's been no accident, nobody's gone to hospital, nothing. It got sent off to Crown Hill, and it came back, no further action.
But for Jackie, it seemed like a peaceful life in Devon was looking more and more unlikely. In York, Chris Barnes had faced problems with his neighbour for 5 years. And now he had found nails in his tyres, he feared for his safety. Chris suspected it was his neighbour, Mr. Gunn, but he had no proof.
The police said that if I was you, I'd put some CCTV up, especially, you know, with the nails in the tyres, it's quite dangerous.
The first thing that Chris noticed was something being piled up against his fence.
He would store lots of like rubbish at the side of his house, so it was opposite my kitchen window, and it was rotting wood and just bags of rubbish, and it just looked awful, unsightly. And so I actually built the fence a little bit higher so it would hide all this rubbish, but he just built the rubbish higher. I just can't win. I can't win here.
Eventually, the weight of Mr. Gunn's rubbish mountain proved too much.
The weight of the bags has shoved the panel out, and these are the bags. They're just like really heavy, full of soil, manure, and there's just bits of wire coming through, and it's just a mess. Just beggars belief. It's just disgusting. I feel stressed and I mean, I've been in tears. Even though to a lot of people it seems maybe quite petty, but this has been going on for so long. I just see the guy as being a nasty piece of work.
Chris was reaching the end of his tether.
Because I was reporting all these incidents and the police was coming around, they gave him another harassment warning lasting 12 months. But this one didn't take any notice of it. He just carried on.
And Mr. Gunn seemed to have come up with a new way to upset his neighbour.
He breaks open a little section of the fence so that he can put his soil and compost there, manure, and just jet washes it through pretty much every day. I'll repair it. Next day, hammer and chisel, breaks it open again. To me, it's a health hazard. You know, it's filthy brown water and it just all cascades onto my driveway. That's what's come out of that hole. It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
But what Chris didn't know was that things were about to go from bad to worse. Near Glasgow, Chris and Gail Slavin had fallen out with their next-door neighbours, the McGeckys, and they suspected Patrick of spraying weed killer onto their plants. Late one night, they were determined to try and catch him in the act.
Stay away from our piece of land. Idiot.
Things, however, quickly got out of hand.
Put my hand on the railing, I felt a punch to the right side of my face. I grabbed the t-shirt, pulled the two A's down onto the slabs. We traded punches. Gail was shouting, "Stop it, somebody's going to get hurt." This time Patrick pushed me down onto the ground here all the time, kicking and punching. I managed to grab his leg. Patrick, into his left jeans pocket, pulled out a knife and started swinging the knife. I felt just above my left eye a nick, left hand. Just at that, I managed to knock the knife out of Patrick's hand, pushed him away. I ran into the house.
That night, Chris was taken to the hospital.
I received two injuries, one to my forehead, just above my left eye. I had 5 stitches and a cut between my thumb and my first finger. I was in shock and didn't expect things to turn out the way they did. Patrick turning aggressive and nasty.
Patrick McGecky was arrested. He claimed he was acting in self-defence and that Christopher had thrown the first punch. The weed-killing charges were dropped, but he was tried for serious assault. However, when the verdict was read, the Slavins were in for a shock.
The verdict came back, not guilty. Numb. There's no words that can describe it.
The court was satisfied Patrick McGecky had acted in self-defence. 2 months after the trial, Chris had visitors.
And it was 2 police officers said, "There's been an allegation that you've threatened Patrick McGecky, but there is no witnesses, so we'll not be proceeding any further with the allegation, just make you aware of it." I hadn't done anything at all. As far as I was concerned, that's the end of the matter.
It wasn't. A few days later, the police returned.
A witness had come forward to say that they had witnessed me threatening Patrick McGecky on the Saturday, and later found out this witness was his mother.
Patrick McGecky had accused Christopher of making abusive threats to him in the back garden, and Chris was charged with breach of the peace. But he wasn't the only Slavin to get on the wrong side of the law.
I was out hoovering out my car, and Mrs McGecky came out from her house and walked down, and I said, "Liar." And she turned round and gave me nothing but verbal abuse. I just laughed at her.
But another neighbour who overheard the exchange has an entirely different version of events. He's agreed to speak, although he's asked us to conceal his identity.
Gail started it, bawling and shouting, swearing, and the next thing Gail, I think she seen me in the corner of her eye at the back of her, and she started to calm down a bit and started saying things like, "Mrs McGeechy, just go away, you're just making a fool of yourself, you know, blah blah blah." She started turning the tables as if Mrs McGeechy had been the aggressor. That's how cunning she is, you know.
Gail denies this happened, but the police were called and she was charged with threatening and abusive behaviour.
We've been made into the bad ones, I think, haven't we?
Yeah, we are.
Gail agreed to pay a fine in order to avoid trial. Christopher was offered a similar deal for his alleged defence.
It would mean I wouldn't go to court, I wouldn't go any further, but I would be accepting guilt. So I wrote back and says, "No, I'm not prepared to. I've never done anything."
Convinced of his innocence, Christopher Slavin went to court and was tried for threatening behaviour towards Patrick McGeechy.
When the Justice and Peace came back and found me guilty, I was again flabbergasted. I couldn't believe the outcome of it.
Christopher Slavin was given a 6-month deferred sentence and a criminal record. What was once a shared doorstep and a home to happy memories is now divided by a 6-foot fence, and relations between the former friends are in tatters.
If we meet McGeechy's in the street, they can't look our way.
The McGeechys declined to be part of this film, but said the outcome of the various court proceedings against the Slavins speak for themselves.
I can't actually see any good coming out of it now. It's went on far too long and the winds are deep.
Coming up, things get violent in York.
Couldn't believe it. I was in a bit of a shock, really.
And in Devon, the neighbourhood falls under 24-hour surveillance.
I always think everything's to do with me because I'm paranoid with all of them now.
And don't forget, there's still time to enter our competition to win £10,000. You could pay off your bills for 6 months, take a holiday with the family, or refresh your home. For your chance to win 10 grand, text Nightmare to 65515 or post your name and phone number to Nightmare, PO Box 7557, Derby DE10NP. For rules and winners, go to channel5.com/win. And good luck. For 5 years, Chris Barnes had been harassed by his neighbour, Mr. Gunn. But when he decided to confront him about the waste he had been hosing onto his driveway, things soon came to a head.
Opened the front door, so I came just outside the front door. I just asked Mr. Gunn if he'd stop washing the filthy water thrown to my driveway. He just started mouthing off at me. And he lifted the hosepipe up, pointed it at me. The water just hit me straight in the face, got me in the eyes. Couldn't believe it. I was in a bit of a shock, really, because I thought, well, the guy's getting aggressive now. You know, it was almost like he'd taken it to another level, really.
The police came and arrested Mr. Gunn. He was charged with assault by beating, and a date was set for a hearing.
I was glad that something was happening. So I went to court and I gave my statement of what happened, and then Mr. Gunn gave his statement, and then he was, he was found guilty.
Mr. Gunn was convicted and fined £500 and was instructed not to go near Mr. Barnes for 12 months or he would be arrested. Chris hoped his nightmare was at an end.
I thought it would help, to be honest. I thought, that's got to curb it, surely. No, just carried on.
We asked Mr. Gunn for his comments, but we have so far not received a response. With no apparent end to his neighbour's harassment, Chris is faced with an uncertain future.
Saved up, worked hard to buy this house, and I've got somebody living next door to me that's damaging and spoiling my property. And why should he be allowed to carry on like that? Mr. Gunn is, for me, he's quite an evil character. You know, he's upset me a lot of times, and there's just no reason for it. He's just a nasty piece of work. I just don't like the guy. Don't like him at all.
When foster carer Jackie moved into her picturesque home in Devon, she couldn't have predicted the nightmare that followed.
Now it seems like I'm public enemy number one.
And 8 years on, Jackie feels like there is no escaping it.
If you look just up there, there's a camera up there, and that camera covers anybody walking down this walkway that leads to my house. So it made me feel quite intimidated, because I thought, oh my God, you know, I'm being watched. It's like being in Big Brother.
And it wasn't long before Jackie's daughter Lauren made an appearance on a neighbour's CCTV camera.
I was coming up the walkway from my house, and my boyfriend was waiting in the car, and I looked up at the window to see a shadow, like a person, and I said, oh look, they're up there again.
But just a few days later, her gesture would return to haunt her.
The police sent a letter to say come into the station, and that I'd been harassing the neighbours by doing horrible gestures like sticking my fingers up. But I wasn't.
The CCTV was eventually found to be inconclusive, and the police took no action.
It's just over the top, really, the amount of CCTV cameras there for that small space.
But it would appear that it wasn't just the CCTV keeping watch.
It's just about to leave now, and he's just coming up. There he is, so I don't know why he's been here or what.
Do you think that's to do with you?
I always think everything's to do with me because I'm paranoid with all of them now. But hopefully it's not.
Jackie's paranoia aside, she still had nowhere to park, and the Residents' Association had now decided to make the parking situation even clearer.
And now the latest thing that I've got, you can see these two bollards are now cemented into the ground, so I can't even park there anyway.
Jackie was told the posts were to prevent subsidence.
Everybody has a parking space here, but I don't. They all have parking.
Whatever the reason for the posts, Jackie wasn't convinced. Soon the focus was on her again.
I actually did get a letter from the management company saying that I was running a business and I must stop immediately. And it just wasn't fair. I felt like they were being discriminated against.
Jackie has now had to stop housing young people under supported lodgings in her own home.
My son says, why don't you leave all that negativity, mother, and get on with your life? And I thought, well, they're pushing me out of my home and I actually do love it here. I would just like them to just stop and think, what has Jackie actually ever done to you? What have I done to you? I just want to get on with my life.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour. Next time, a pensioner gets violent.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
A veteran tackles the police next door.
I picked up this one swung.
At the nightmare building extension.
The gap between our property is like inches.
If you love CSI, you'll know that love can be crime's catalyst. Tonight from 10, our CSI special, Till Death Do Us Part. Before that, the O.J. Simpson murder case. What happened to his ex in those final days? New autopsy is next.
In the UK, the problem of nightmare neighbours has never been worse.
And he whomps me onto the ground.
My husband had blood all over his face, and I thought he was dead.
1 in 5 of us has been at war with next door.
The truth always comes out. Never forget that, scumbag.
Flaring tempers can turn home life into a living hell.
We've had a baseball bat. Is this gangster land now?
Coming up, neighbours clash on a Glasgow estate.
I thought, this is it. This man's going to kill me.
As far as I'm concerned, you can get every human that there is, yeah? Put them up against the wall, shoot them.
A garden wall in Wiltshire gets the makeover from hell.
It's almost like seeing the Great Wall of China from the moon.
I will not be bullied by him or anybody else.
And a conservatory starts a boundary war in Bedfordshire.
I wouldn't spit on him if he was on fire.
Government advisor Edward Lee and his wife, head teacher Denise, moved to a small village in Wiltshire in 1994.
We've now been here 20 years, which is longer than I've lived anywhere in one place, and they can bury me here.
Down on the compost.
Probably will.
For nature lover Denise, it was a dream come true.
We're just across the River Avon. This is the back of our house, looking onto my baby, this glorious garden. All this grass is wonderful habitat for butterflies and for their larvae. And that helps with my breeding programme in the summer.
Soon after they moved in, they expanded their property by purchasing a strip of land between them and the house next door. Running through the land was a public right-of-way. 10 years went by and Edward and Denise got in. In the UK, the problem of nightmare neighbours has never been worse.
Oi, you were assaulting me!
I was shaking. I was absolutely terrified.
1 in 5 of us has been at war with next door.
Never forget that, scumbag.
Where flaring tempers can turn home life into a living hell.
We dread coming home.
Coming up, it's war on 2 fronts in Sheffield.
He was hacking down with the knife.
A couple in Cardiff meet a nightmare neighbour.
I walked to the kitchen and I saw him sulking in a petrol.
And a garden dispute in Brighton turns violent.
This fist came out and punched me right in the neck.
"69-year-old Rod Scott is retired and lives in the small area of mill houses on the edge of Sheffield.
I've been here since '78, and as you can see, I like my gardening.
Rod lived peacefully in the area for more than 20 years, until in 2002 a new family moved in next door.
I was just watching TV, then there was a large banging on the door, and it was really 11:30 at night. Who is this? I came out into the hallway, got to the door, and there was a woman standing there, and she said to me, my name is Mrs. Hall, and this is my husband Bob, and we're the new neighbours, and we thought we'd just come round and see what the neighbours were like. It was obvious they'd been in the pub drinking. Fair dues, they introduced themselves, but I think in anybody's book, it's not the right time of the day to knock on somebody's door and introduce yourself.
Aside from this incident, which the Halls deny, the neighbours initially lived in peace. But all that changed one day in 2006.
I was working in my garden all day, and I was playing this Pavarotti tape, And I heard this voice screaming and shouting, "Rod, Rod, Rod!" And I walked out to see Hall storming down his driveway. The first thing he said was, "Turn that thing off. Don't take the piss out of me. I will sort you out." So I just stood here rather shocked, wondering what had got into him. So I phoned the police and I asked them could they have a word in his ear and explained that he couldn't conduct himself like this in the community and nip it in the bud. And I think that was the biggest mistake, because after that it just grew out of all proportion.
Rod and the Halls fell back into an uneasy truce, but it wouldn't be long before that changed.
One morning I heard a noise and looked out, and a chap was on a ladder and he was fixing a camera on the side that was looking directly into my house, and then they put 2 more cameras on the front of the house.
The Halls say they installed CCTV on police advice, but Rod was convinced they were watching him.
A friend of mine suggested to get a little laser, and I was in the kitchen. I pointed it at that camera. He did say that if shine it in and it could damage the cells, and as the camera was pointing straight into my house, I thought I had kind of had the right to disarm it. I think it was the laser beam that eventually persuaded Mr. Hall to take it down.
Rod thought he had left conflict behind him. He'd spent his career in the armed forces and served 15 years as a paratrooper, until an accident shattered his back, leaving it held together by plates and screws, and Rod retired. But a peaceful retirement seemed a long way off.
Mrs. Hall used to have a camcorder, and here is a photograph of her with the camcorder. She used to hold up signs that said paedophile, twat, wanker, paranormal written on it.
Mrs. Hall claims she was videoing Rod's unreasonable behaviour. Rod says he'd done nothing wrong, but one summer evening things came to a head.
It was nearly midnight. I was working in my garage, just tidying up a little. I got to about here, there was a flash of light, and Mr. Hall was leaning up round the panels that were down the side of the fence with a camera, and he shouted, "Gotcha!" And I'd been working in my garage all night long, just tidying up a little. There was no noise, never was any noise, and there was no way they could hear me, not with the road traffic, and that's what I had to put up with.
The Halls have denied this event took place, but the next morning Rod got a shock visit.
2 police officers came into my kitchen and they produced this.
Coming up, Rod's neighbours get violent.
He raised his right arm and he was holding the carving knife.
And 2 Brighton residents go to war over a path.
I stayed there for 9 hours on the lies she told.
In Brighton, Wendy Attenborough moved into a ground floor council flat after living overseas.
Quite a lot of them in the street came up and introduced themselves and asked me who I was. They always asked the same question, was, have you met your new neighbour yet? And so that put me on red alert.
76-year-old George Brooker owned the flat directly above Wendy.
Brightonian all my life. I was married 13 years. Then we got divorced and I moved here. Yeah, I've been living in about 30 years. It's quite nice, it's nice and quiet.
It wasn't long before Wendy and George met for the first time.
I was in the back garden, he walked down the garden towards me, and I do try not to judge a book by its cover, as it were, but he sort of hugged towards me, just had an aura of aggression.
Bad aura?
He just introduced himself and went straight into complaining about the government and the council. It was just all negative, completely negative. So I just said, you know, I'm busy, and excused myself kind of, and he wandered back up the garden. So my heart kind of sank.
Despite her initial impressions, the new neighbours had a friendly relationship at first.
Well, we used to talk, one thing and another. We used to, if the dustman had been, I used to bring her bin in, and she used to bring mine in. And we turned round and we used to get on all right.
As part of her tenancy, Wendy had the use of one garden at the front of the property and another at the rear. Mr. Brooker upstairs owns a separate garden that runs around one side of the property. But within weeks of moving in, Wendy started to feel an unsettling presence from over the fence.
If I was sitting on my lounge at night, he would just come and stand by the fence and look in at me in the lounge. I was really creeped out by it.
Because Wendy's flat was on the ground floor, it offered little privacy from Mr. Brooker's garden. But it wasn't just through the windows that Wendy felt her upstairs neighbour exerting his presence.
He was mirroring what I do. You know, if I started hoovering, he'd start hoovering. If I got up, he would get up. I could hear him in his bedroom.
This is a wooden floor, right? And unfortunately, there's not much insulation in there between the ceiling downstairs and the floor here.
If I went to the bathroom or I had a shower, he would flush the toilet. He would try and assert his presence by noise.
How would I know she's in the toilet when I'm up here and she's down there? Load of rubbish. Load of rubbish. She must sit there, think about these things, but I don't interfere with anybody else up around here.
But when Wendy started putting expensive ornaments and plants on the pathway leading to her front door and garden, the troubles really began to escalate.
I started finding things had been broken. I had 2 garden gnomes that were broken. Plants had been moved around in their pots. There was no explanation why these things had been broken, and I knew it was him just smashing things.
The gnome what she put there, right? Unfortunately, the wind blew the gnome onto the path, which as you could see there, had a drop of about a foot. So that's where it broke. I didn't break it.
Because the path around the property gave access to her front door, Wendy assumed it was shared between the 2 flats.
There'd been no grumbles from him when I'd been taking care of the path, which was very unkempt and full of weed for like a year and a half, because I thought the path was a communal path.
But Wendy was wrong.
The whole lot of the communal way to her fence is mine. My lease states that in blue.
About a year and a half after I'd been there, I suddenly heard the path was his.
Despite the simmering tension, Wendy had big plans for her home.
After I'd been in the flat a year, I got my secure tenancy, so I decided then that was the right time to ask for permission to put up a 6-foot fence, which would stop him being able to look in at me and give me some more privacy. I got the fence put up, and this was the start of really some serious harassment. The first night, woke up in the morning and one of the posts had been pulled out of the concrete.
Well, I pulled it out because it was in my property. That is trespass.
Although she thought this small piece of land was hers, it wasn't. According to the land registry, Wendy's new 6-foot fence encroached into Mr. Brooker's garden. And this simple mistake would have huge consequences.
The next thing I knew, this fist came out and punched me right in the neck.
In Sheffield, Rod Scott had been living peacefully for over 20 years until an argument with his new neighbours, the Halls, landed him in hot water.
2 police officers came into my kitchen and they produced this. And I asked him what the form was about, and he said it was a harassment first course of conduct. The allegations were the fact that I was shaking the fence separating the properties, that I was making loud noises at night up to the time of midnight, also for verbal abuse. None of these were true.
Following the harassment warning, Rod tried to keep away from the Halls, but that wouldn't last long. One night in June 2008, Rod was saying goodbye to his friend Ian outside when the row with his neighbours was suddenly reignited in explosive fashion.
Ian had gone round to his side to get him to drive, and that's when I saw him looking, and I looked, and there was Mrs. Hall, giving us nasty hand signals. Ian was looking, and I said to him, that's what I'm having to put up with day in, day out. Within a few seconds, Hall had come out of his house. He came straight across the pavement, went round to the other side of the car, whereupon he put his arm around Ian's neck in this manner and screamed at him, I will have you, you bastard. I was standing on this side. I shouted at Hall, don't be so stupid, get back in your house. And Hall came up, he just swung a wild punch and caught me bang in the ear. He knocked my spectacles off, they finished up somewhere down there. I did manage to, with an outstretched arm, I struck out for his eyes in this manner because I've got fairly long arms to keep him at arm's length.
But Rod's self-defence tactic appeared to anger Mr. Hall even further.
I saw Hall walk across the grass and he went up to the door, and then within a second or so he was walking back down again, and it wasn't until he got into the middle of the grass did I see that he raised his right arm and he was holding the carving knife. He was hacking down with the knife, and the knife came down and just went between my fingers.
Witnesses had seen the fight and the police were called. They arrived and arrested Mr. Hall. But as he was being taken away, his wife had a few final words for Rod.
Mrs. Hall shouted at them, this man's called me a gypsy. And then she immediately shouted, I put a gypsy curse on you. And with a I curse you, I curse you. She just carried on saying it. And eventually the police officer just said to me, go back in your house. And as I backed over the road, the curse must have been working because I tripped over my shoelace.
Mrs. Hall denies putting a curse on Rod, but Mr. Hall was charged with common assault and bailed. While Rod awaited Mr. Hall's trial, he kept himself busy in his garden. But this triggered a whole new set of problems when his neighbours at the rear, close friends of Mr. Hall, took issue with the new summer house Rod was erecting and accused him of building a sniper tower. Rod says they took every opportunity to provoke him.
They used to come down behind the hedges, give me verbal abuse, and they do nothing but take photographs. I then spoke to this lady, her husband, who was very cavalier with a statement that I was a scumbag. So I said to this lady, tell your husband that if he ever calls me a scumbag again, I will rip his head off and shit in the hole. That's a kind of a military expression which means I'll come down on you.
Because of his outburst to the neighbours at the rear, Rod was arrested and hit with a restraining order. This prevented him from accessing their road or communicating with them in any way. But for Rod, this was easier said than done.
I put a sign up. I was arrested for the sign, and the other breach was an individual came over the top of the fence, and I was arrested for communicating with him.
Rod was charged with breaching his restraining order and awaited trial, but events were about to spiral out of control. Just outside Cardiff, Peter and Marjana Knapp had moved to the UK from Poland to start a family and bought their dream home in rural Wales.
Actually, we were looking for a 3-bedroom house and with a garden, with a beautiful garden, and we found it, so we were really pleased.
Very friendly people, very friendly atmosphere, like village.
Their new community was extremely close-knit, according to local hairdresser Christine Evans.
The community spirit is brilliant. If anything goes wrong, everybody sort of comes together and we all help each other. And that's one good thing about this place, to be honest.
And they were welcomed by the residents, including shop owner Lee Coles.
Peter and Marjana were really nice people. They came in, they were polite, they introduced themselves as neighbours if there's anything they can do to help, and vice versa, we told them the same. They were very outgoing, nice people.
But not all the neighbours were so friendly.
So it was the first day that we were moving in when suddenly the man appears across the hedge and he just asked me, so how many people is going to live here? Well, I thought anyway that it was rude, but I said, well, at the moment 2. And he said, what do you mean 2? I found it awkward, to be honest, because it's not normal. You know, when you meet a person for the first time, usually you introduce yourself. Or maybe, would you like some kind of help?
The man Marjana had met was 55-year-old Charles Gilbert, a well-known figure in the neighbourhood.
Yeah, I know Charles. He used to come in now and again. He used to go to my mum's. My mum was a hairdresser's next door. Unfortunately, he wasn't allowed in these 2 shops because he was racist and kind of sexist. Not a very nice chap, no, to be honest.
He was a very strange character, very, very strange. One you'd have to be a bit careful about. I felt a bit uneasy around him then. That's the words I have to describe myself, that I would be very cautious around him. He made me feel very uneasy.
And unfortunately for Marjana and Peter, Charles was their next door neighbour. And within 2 days, trouble started.
I found a lot of cigarette ends here. I found a lot of can and empty bottle of cider, and I found some bottle of cider here.
As well as the stuff on the hedge, there were 2 cans left somewhere on the grass here. One was after rice pudding and another one was Tesco beans. The stuff, it didn't belong to us at all, so someone must have thrown it into our garden.
After clearing the rubbish away, they were baffled to wake up the next day to find yet more waste scattered on their property.
We started to realize that it was actually like a puzzle, that there was some stuff left in our rear garden and then in our front garden, something left on the hedge. We just saw that, you know, it couldn't be left by someone from the outside, and it must have been Charles.
Believing they knew where it had come from, the Knaps decided to confront their next door neighbour.
We asked him why he keeps throwing the rubbish into our garden, and he said, because you're noisy. So I said, why you haven't came and knocked to our door and said this? Guys, you know, you're a bit noisy, can you just be quiet, please? He said something like, you Poles, get back to Nolan, get back to Poland. And we're like, really shocked.
Baffled by the incident, but determined to enjoy their new home, the Knaps decided to build a conservatory.
When I bring my conservatory from the van, I saw Charles and he asked me what is my plan. I tell him I will build my conservatory in my garden.
But Charles was far from happy about the new construction.
He said to Peter that if Peter's going to build up anything in our own garden, he's going to explode it.
Explode it?
Explode it.
For the Knaps, this was just the beginning of their nightmare. Coming up, the Knaps get the shock of their lives.
I walked to the kitchen and I saw him soaking in a petrol.
And Rod Scott gets some new troublesome neighbours.
Right, well, there we have one of Mr. Hall's best bred rats.
If your home life is sometimes a bit of a nightmare, our competition could really make a difference. We've got £10,000 to give away. Imagine what you could do with 10 grand. Maybe you could take the family away for a well-deserved holiday. Or perhaps it's time to spruce up your home and reclaim the garden from the wilderness. Whatever it is you need, Channel 5 wants to give you a helping hand. So for your chance to win, call 0904 161 9955 or text WIN to 85545 or post your name and phone number to WIN, PO Box 7557, Derby, DE1 0NP. Calls cost £1.53 from a BT landline. Calls from other landlines and mobiles may cost considerably more. Text costs £1.50 plus one message at standard network rate. Lines close at midday on the date shown on screen and 3 days later for postal entries. For rules, go to channel5.com/win. In Brighton, a new 6-foot fence erected by Wendy Attenborough had angered her upstairs neighbour George Brooker. According to land registry documents, the gate of Wendy's new fence had encroached onto Mr. Brooker's land.
Oh, he would go out and punch the gate and the fence and saying, "That's my property."
One day, when Wendy was tending to plants on the pathway leading to her garden, the situation turned ugly.
It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was just packing up, and out he comes, and he starts pulling out my flowers that I'd planted. Then he started moving his chain link fence right up to the path, so it was only a matter of about 6 inches. I was just asking him to please stop, because I didn't know what he was doing and he wouldn't explain anything.
But Mr. Brooker recalls events very differently.
The I remember about the day is the mere fact is she was pulling my chain link fence out the ground.
The next thing I knew, this fist came out and punched me right in the neck.
No, I didn't strike her in any way, shape or form.
And I just screamed, Paul, who's my neighbour, he's just hit me. And he'd got one of the metal stakes that was holding his chain link fence together, and he held it right up to the neck, and it's got my neck, it's got a really sharp point on the end. He was just like this.
And then she got on her phone and she screamed and shouted her mouth off that I was hitting her.
The police came, they said that if I wanted to take it further, they have to arrest both of us. And I'd never been arrested or in trouble with the police in my life, so I backed off with that. But in hindsight, I wish I had said, yes, arrest us both, so I could have got to the bottom of it.
Nobody saw any blood on her. So I would have thought if that was the case, she would have showed it to the police officer, because there was 2 there, and then I would have always been arrested at the time.
The police took no further action. But according to Wendy, Mr. Brooker's behaviour suddenly took a more sinister turn.
For example, I would be out there mowing the front lawn. I could hear him taking photos, the snaps of a camera, so he started taking photos of me and just doing anything to harass me.
The basis of that was she told me that she had a nasty car accident and she couldn't bend because she had a back problem. Well, to me that's another lie, because the photographs I did take, it just showed her bending down, and when her clothes at the back pulled up, you could see her back. And if the person can push a fly mow with one hand, I don't think there's much wrong with a person's back.
Wendy says she reported some of Mr. Brooker's alleged harassment to the council, but no action was taken. Meanwhile, Mr. Brooker decided to reinstate his boundary by hand.
So what I did, I measured 3 feet, put a chalk mark in with an arrow, and what happened was, when it rained, it blew the chalk mark away, so I painted it in. And she's saying, because I painted it over to her, underneath where the cat was going in, it's her property. It's not her property, it's still mine. She is the trespasser, not me.
But Wendy Attenborough had had enough, and it wasn't long before she declared all-out war. Peter and Marjana Knapp had recently moved to a quiet suburb of Cardiff. However, their neighbour Charles Gilbert had made life difficult from day one, leaving rubbish in their garden and threatening to blow up a new conservatory they were building. Despite their neighbour's objections, Peter and his friend went ahead with the new construction. But then they noticed something alarming.
When my friend waiting in the van, I asked him, "Do you smell petrol?" My friend said, "Yes, I smell petrol. Maybe this is, do you have some leak?" Yes. And he asked me, "Are you crazy? My van is new."
Petrol was exactly what he'd smelt, and it wasn't coming from his friend's van.
I continue collection my stuff from the van, and when I came back to the house, I feel everywhere some liquid, yes, strange liquid, strange smell. I frozen because I didn't know what's happened exactly. I closed my eye and quickly came back to the house. When I come in, I wash my eyes, face, everything. I didn't know what happened exactly.
When I heard Peter was calling me, so I just came out. I walked to the kitchen and I saw him soaking in a petrol. So I asked him, what has happened, and he just told me that the neighbor put petrol over him. I was shocked. I just didn't know what to think about it at all. And he asked me to call the police.
Whilst Marjana was upstairs on the phone to the police, she heard a commotion going on downstairs.
He heard some voice getting up from the rear garden, so he went to check it out. He noticed that Charles was standing in the rear garden with a lit match. And then he quickly shut the door.
Completely crazy guy, completely.
The Knaps locked all the doors and waited anxiously for the police to arrive.
Well, we felt it basically like rats in a cage in our own house, which was really ridiculous, and the time was passing very slowly while we've been waiting for the police. The police came after about 40 minutes, so it was a long time anyway.
But when the police turned up, Charles Gilbert was nowhere to be seen.
They tried to arrest Charles. They've been knocking to his door. They tried to go through our rear garden into his garden, and there was no movement that anyone was there.
After a fruitless search, they gave up and promised to return the next day. But the Knaps were in for a terrifying night.
When the police have gone, we were scared Charles might have been everywhere, and we were afraid that he could even explode our house. We were listening to, every single noise around. We were checking whether Charles could be somewhere around. We were also afraid that he could break into our house and just kill us. Do anything else I even can't imagine.
The next day, Charles was spotted in his house by another neighbour, and the police soon had his property surrounded.
Some of the policemen were waiting for Charles into his rear garden. Some of them were banging into the front door. And the neighbours ensured them that Charles is definitely in the house. So they just forced the door and they enter and they cuff him.
Charles Gilbert was arrested and placed on bail, but unsure if he'd return to the property, the Knaps were still living in fear.
For about either 24, 48 hours or maybe 3 days, we were still not sure what's going to happen, whether he will be allowed to go back home or not. And if he does, then he could just kill us.
And the stress started to take its toll.
I didn't go to work about 2-3 weeks because I couldn't sleep. I think all the time about the situation, how my life will be here, because I think about baby, but this situation, it was completely a shock for us.
I was scared. Since then, I think for a very long time we did not feel safe into our own house.
In January 2014, Charles Gilbert was tried and found guilty of racially aggravated common assault and sentenced to 16 months imprisonment and a 10-year restraining order.
I think that something should have happened a while ago. It was like the eruption waiting to come then, if you know what I mean.
He's sort of outcast now because you can't do that, no matter what. They're a part of our community, they live here, they do the same as everybody else, look after the street.
But I was extremely happy and I thanked my husband straight away. Because, you know, in that way it means that we can stay in the house and we can lead a normal life.
In Sheffield, ex-paratrooper Rod Scott had fallen out with all his neighbours. His next-door neighbour Mr Hall was on bail for attacking Rod with a knife. But Rod himself wasn't squeaky clean. He had a restraining order issued against him by his other neighbours. Although banned from communicating with them, Rod had been putting up threatening signs and had made gestures and shouted over the fence.
I put a sign up. I was arrested for the sign, and the other breach was an individual came over the top of the fence and I was arrested for communicating with him. And the other one, there were some builders on the house next door and I asked them if they would just bear witness to the harassments that I was getting from this neighbour, and I was arrested for that.
Rod was charged and found guilty of breaching his restraining order with his threatening behaviour and was sentenced to 4 months in jail, suspended for 18 months. After that, he kept himself to himself till some new neighbours arrived.
One evening I was here with my friend Ian, and I saw him look up and he said, "Look at that," and we turned round and all I could see were little rats all running up into the bird feeder, and it was obvious that there was a nest somewhere.
Pretty soon the rats were all over the neighbourhood, and as Rod was the first to spot them, everyone thought they were breeding in his garden. But Rod thought differently.
Next door here, where you see the 2 kitchen extensions, there was a pipe going into the wall and there was a hole there, and the rats were going up there, getting into the cavity walls and then eventually getting into the houses through the cavities. I was also getting them. I could lie in bed and I could hear them running around upstairs. It was obvious they were all coming from next door, from the Hall's residence, and that's what we had to look into.
Convinced he knew the culprit, Rod decided on a line of defence.
I had a rat trap. I think altogether I caught about 64 or 68 rats. And because the council wanted evidence of rats and so on and so forth, as I caught these, rather than throw them away, I had an old deep freezer in the garage so I could show them when they came up the kind of infestation that we had. And this is one that I kept for the council. Right, well there we have one of Mr. Hall's best bred rats, and this is what we had to tolerate. On one occasion, when I had caught, I think 3 or 4 rats that day, continuously coming from the Hall side, I'd really had enough of this and I threw one rat back into the Hall's garden, onto their grass.
While the battle with the rats continued, good news arrived when Mr. Hall was convicted after the knife fight on 2 counts of common assault.
He was found guilty on all counts. He was the one who came out and assaulted Ian, my friend, myself, and I feel that giving him 250 hours community work was a bit of an insult for, in my eyes, an attempted murder, because he'd been threatening to kill me for 23 months.
The Halls have now moved out of the house next door to Rod. They say they have never threatened Rod or called him a paedophile.
I think the Halls left Possibly living next door to a neighbour that they didn't get on with could be a contributing factor. I don't lose any sleep over it. I think because of my background that I've had far worse things than this, but it was just niggling. But I was thinking, thank God for that. I can have a little bit of peace now without being photographed, without being verbally abused. When they moved, then I thought, fantastic. I hope they move to the other side of the Pennines.
Coming up, Rod faces a new line of attack.
It says, you still here, Scott, it's about bloody time that you off.
And in Brighton, it's the day of reckoning.
She was trespassing in my property. They should have arrested her, not me.
Don't forget about your chance to boost your bank account by a massive £10,000. You could take a family holiday or spruce up your home. It's completely up to you. To enter, call 0904 161 9955 or text WIN to 85545 or post your name and phone number to WIN, PO Box 7557, Derby DE1 0NP. For rules, go to channel5.com/WIN. In Brighton, relations between Wendy Attenborough and her upstairs neighbour George Brooker had reached an all-time low. An argument over who owned a small area of path had erupted into violence. And having reported Mr. Brooker for harassment, Wendy decided to take matters into her own hands.
The council wouldn't help me to get any proof, and I couldn't afford a CCTV camera myself, so I got a fake one. It cost me £5, and I put it on the wall on my side of the gate, and it just had a little flashing light. I mean, he probably knew it was fake, but he spray painted it.
Well, that was 99p in the pound 99p shop. She put it on the wall. If I'd have sprayed it, it wouldn't have made any difference, because it wasn't hiding anything at all, because it was only a 99p imitation, so it wasn't even a real camera. But I didn't spray it.
With paint on the camera and on her patio, Wendy felt the evidence against Mr. Brooker was mounting.
So I called the police, and they came and they arrested him for criminal damage and harassment.
How can I harass her? Well, you tell me.
They took him off and they kept him in the cells overnight and apparently strip searched him because he was being really aggressive to the police.
I was fingerprinted, DNA the lot. And I stayed there for 9 hours on the lies she told. She was trespassing in my property. They should have arrested her, not me.
The next morning, Mr. Brooker was released without charge, but the argument still wasn't resolved.
There was a tiny bit of justice, but it just carried on. It didn't stop him.
6 months later, Wendy decided enough was enough.
When I moved out, I didn't tell anybody that I was moving. One day, the moving van came and I was gone. I still carry with me a lot of hurt and anger from what I was put through by Mr. Brooker, and it shouldn't happen to anybody else. And I really pity the new tenants.
Well, I'm quite happy she's moved, because the fence is gone now. But if that fence hadn't have gone up, there wouldn't have been no different. We would have still been bringing each other's bins in and one thing and another. We do it, the lady downstairs does it now, and I do it for her. I think I'm a good neighbour.
In Sheffield, Rod Scott and his 2 sets of neighbours had come to blows. The Halls, who lived next door, had moved out, but they'd left something behind.
The Halls moved and the new neighbour arrived, who I must say was a breath of fresh air, but he started to develop electrical problems. So I went round there and eventually we traced it. I lifted out the floorboards and the first thing we saw was a dead rat that was clamped onto the wire and quite dead. These were some of the rats that we took out from underneath the floor. And as far as I'm concerned, they have been cannibalized. The council came, the environmental people, and they witnessed all the evidence of the Hall's old house, and they confirmed that that was the source of the rats in the area.
Rod had freed mill houses of the rat plague, but the Hall still deny responsibility. Rod's other neighbours, who he'd been found guilty of harassing, then moved away too.
Did I breathe a sigh of relief? Well, I thought, well, this vindictiveness and maliciousness that I haven't really experienced in my life has now, hopefully, gone away.
But Rod's ordeal wasn't over. He had for some time been receiving a lot of mail and felt this wasn't a coincidence.
These coupons were being filled in my name, and as a result I received about 2 meters of mail. It was all to do with aquability, paying for your funeral, invalid showers, mobility showers, but there were hundreds of these coming. I had no desire whatsoever to have any of this.
It wasn't just brochures for the elderly that were sent to Mr. Scott.
It says, "You still here, Scott? It's about bloody time that you off and move somewhere else. Convicted criminals like you shouldn't be living amongst decent people." I think these letters just tell you the story, that whoever is writing them is malicious, vindictive, and they've got a purpose in their sad little life to make my life a little uncomfortable.
The Halls have denied sending any letters, but Rod keeps a close eye on his neighbours and his post.
I feel that they won't stop, and I have no intention whatsoever of moving from this house.
Next time, a neighbourhood boundary dispute ends in battle.
My husband had blood all over his face and I thought he was dead.
There was blood everywhere. Blood was all over the place. I looked like something out of a horror picture.
A couple are terrified for their safety as life at home becomes a nightmare.
He just shouted at me, "Tell me where he is."
And a small dog starts a war.
Oi!
The Eye in the Sky is spying trouble this week. Catch armed and dangerous caught on camera. That's new tomorrow at 8. Back to tonight, and there's no escaping this knock at the door. Can't pay? We'll take it away continues new, and right after a quick news update next.